Hi there, welcome back to my kitchen. It's a very chilly autumn day here. It's the perfect day for doing some baking. I thought it would be nice to make some maple walnut scones. They are delicious. They're filled with the warm fall flavors of maple and walnuts and just delicious buttery goodness. How about we give them a try? I'll just quickly go over the ingredients. You don't need much for this. Just your usual pantry staples of flour and brown sugar, baking powder, a little bit of salt, an egg, some light cream, a little bit of yogurt, and some butter, maple syrup, of course, vanilla. And the most important thing to do before you get started is to toast your walnuts. So I've got about a cup of walnuts here, and I'm going to spread them out onto a pan and just put them in a light oven for maybe 5-10 minutes, just until they start to smell toasty and fragrant. And then we'll put them on a cutting board and give them a chop. These really should be cool before you start to bake, so if you can do this ahead of time, that would be ideal. I'm just gonna scoop a little handful into this. Set these aside. These are going to be used for sprinkling on top of the scones before we bake them. And the other thing that's good to do ahead of time is to mix up your cream and your yogurt, so you're sort of making a cultured, thick cream. So I have 1/4 cup of just plain yogurt, and I have 1/4 cup of light cream. And I'm just going to pour those together, and I'm just going to give that a very gentle stir, and then I'm going to set it aside. And the yogurt kind of acts on the cream and makes it all thick and like a buttermilk. Next, we'll mix up the dry ingredients for the scones, and that's pretty simple. We have 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1/3 cup of light brown sugar, and a generous pinch of salt. Give those dry ingredients a good mix around, and use a spatula and make sure that you don't have any big lumps of brown sugar. And now we're going to cut in our butter. So I have 1/2 cup of butter, very cold butter, and I'm just going to use my pastry blender to cut this into the dry ingredients. And some of you have left great tips on a previous video I made about scones, saying that you freeze your butter and grate it on a cheese grater. And I think that's a great idea. I just happen to like using a pastry blender, but I have done the grated butter method, and I think it's a perfectly good method to use for ensuring that your butter gets into very small pieces throughout the dry ingredients. I wouldn't necessarily use a food processor for this. I know I've said that before too. I think it makes the butter too small. You sort of want little bits of butter and some bigger bits of butter, and that's what gives scones that beautiful, flaky, blown apart texture once the heat hits it. Every once in a while, clean the butter off the tines of your pastry blender. Okay, that should do it for cutting in the butter. I'll just show you what the texture looks like. So you've got some small bits of butter, some larger bits of butter, and it's all pretty evenly distributed throughout the flour and the sugar. And then we're going to fold in these nice toasted walnuts. Just give that a good stir. Make sure everything is nicely combined, and make a little well in the center. That's where our wet ingredients are going to go. Now it's time to mix up our wet ingredients. So I have an egg. I'm just going to crack that into a little bowl. I'm going to give that a very light beat with a fork. And then this is that mixture of yogurt and cream that we whisked up earlier. See how it's gotten sort of all lumpy and bumpy like a buttermilk. Give that a little whisk. And next we have our beautiful dark maple syrup. This is what's going to give the scones their beautiful autumnal maple flavor. Sweet and earthy and dark and rich. That was about 1/3 cup. And this is just 1 teaspoon of vanilla. Pour this right into the well of our scone mixture. And then just gently fold this together. You don't want to overmix scones or biscuits. You just want a nice shaggy mixture. So I'm going to clear away these things and then we'll shape this into our scones. So 1 minute while I make a place. Put a generous amount of flour on my surface, my work surface. Just spread that all around. Flour your hands and then scoop this scone mixture out onto your board. And always make sure you have a good amount of flour on your hands. And just dust that over the top. And we're going to just gently pat this together, keeping flour on your hands at all times. This is a little sticky, but as you work it and keep flouring your hands, it will all come together. So you want to just gently press this out into a circle. You could also do a square, a big square, if you happen to like your scones in squares. I'm also going to use my bench scraper to make sure that nothing is sticking on the bottom. Just keep patting until you have about 8 to 10 inches. So now I'm going to cut this into 8 wedges. So first I'm going to cut in half, then half again into quarters, and then I'm going to cut each quarter into a half. Find your halfway point. Just press firmly. Keep your bench scraper well floured in case it sticks. And I have a baking sheet that I have lined with a piece of baking parchment paper. I'm just going to use my bench scraper to help me transfer these. They grow together a little bit, just work them apart. And just transfer these to your baking pan. I'm just going to scrape some of this flour away, giving these all room to grow. They are going to puff up in the oven a little bit. So I have a tiny amount of light cream, maybe a couple of tablespoons, and just a little pastry brush. And we're just going to dab cream over the top of everything. I couldn't find this pastry brush for the longest time, and then all of a sudden there it was in my drawer. I don't know how I wasn't seeing it, but do you have that happen to you sometimes? Sometimes I think there are elves in the kitchen playing tricks on me. That 1/4 cup of chopped nuts that we reserved, we're just gonna pop a few of those here and there. And if you want yours chopped a little more finely than that, go ahead. I kind of like these because it signals what's inside. And as I said before, you can use pecans. That would be really delicious in these. Pecans and maple go beautifully together. But maple walnut goes beautifully together too. Maple and walnut. They didn't quite land exactly where you wanted them. Just give them a little maneuver. And for the final embellishment, just a little sugar from your sugar bowl and just sprinkle it from a height over everything. This is going to give it a lovely sweet crunch. Now you may have noticed that I didn't tell you what temperature my oven has been preheated to. That's because I have not turned on my oven yet. I'm going to stick these in the freezer for up to 20 minutes to a half an hour. And now I'm going to turn my oven on to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And that chilling will help the ingredients, and especially the butter, to firm up. And then when the scones hit that hot oven, they're going to bake up beautifully. That butter is going to just burst and melt inside, and the scones are going to rise, and it's going to start smelling heavenly in here. So I've preheated my oven to 400. And my scones have been hanging out in the freezer, and they're now quite a lot firmer than they were when I put them in the freezer. We will pop them in the oven to bake for about 18 to 25 minutes. Wow, it smells so good in here. And my timer just went. And let's check on these. I think they are done. Yeah, they're definitely done. Just going to check the bottoms and see if they're golden, and yes, they are. So I'm going to transfer these to a rack to cool. So we'll let these cool for about a half an hour, and then we'll mix up the maple glaze and give these a little drizzle over the top, and then we'll probably give them a taste as well. So we have to wait patiently. So our maple walnut scones are still nice and warm, but they've been cooling for about a half an hour. So now I'm going to make the glaze. I have half a cup of powdered icing sugar in this little bowl. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm going to stir in just enough maple syrup to make a nice runny glaze. Probably going to need about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. Maybe a little runnier than that. See if that's, yeah, that looks nice. And I've just taken the baking sheet that I used to bake the scones, and I put the rack right on top of the used parchment paper. So that will collect any drips that fall from the icing onto the tray. And then when we're finished, we can just scoop that up and throw it in the bin. So just take nice spoonfuls of this and dribble that all over the top. That's a big blob. Now we'll let that dry and set up for a few minutes, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll break into one of these babies and see what they taste like. Behold the maple walnut scones. What a celebration of fall. They're still slightly warm, but the maple glaze has set up, and I think we can break into one and see what it's like. You can see the walnuts peeking out underneath that maple glaze. The moment of truth. Beautiful and fluffy inside. Just break off a little piece and see what it tastes like. Fantastic. If I do say so myself, there's just a hint of maple and brown sugar within the scone itself. And then the maple glaze on top just enhances and brings everything together. These are perfect. They'd be beautiful for breakfast, beautiful for a coffee date with your friends, beautiful for a brunch, and they're just a perfect fall treat to bake to celebrate while all the leaves have changed color, and maybe they're even a little fuel for you after you've done raking your leaves. I hope you enjoyed this recipe. Thank you so much for stopping by my kitchen. I really like spending time with you, and I really appreciate all of you who have liked and subscribed on my videos. That really helps my channel a lot. I'm just getting started here on YouTube, but I'm hoping to make a delicious recipe for you every week. So I hope I'll see you again next Sunday. I hope you'll give this recipe a try, and I hope you really enjoy it. Bye for now.